Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're looking at El Salvador.
Right.
And it's a fascinating case. I mean, think about this. A country about the size of New Jersey, but it's the most densely populated in Central America.
And that density mixed with the trauma from its long civil war.
It just created this perfect storm.
Exactly. A breeding ground for gangs like MS-13 and Barrio 18 that, for decades, really defined the country, made it the murder capital of the world.
Which brings us to our mission today. We're trying to get at what's been called the Salvadoran paradox under President Nayib Bukele.
Mm-hmm.
He's delivered this unbelievable transformation in security. It's safer than it's ever been, but it's built on a foundation that looks, well, increasingly authoritarian.
And that's the core of it. I think for our listeners, we can really break this down into three pillars.
Okay.
First, the politics, how he consolidated so much power. Second, the security part, which is the most dramatic change. And finally, that high-stakes Bitcoin experiment.
Great. So let's start with the political shift. Bukele just won a second term in 2024.
He did. A landslide.
But the Constitution, the one from 1983, it explicitly says no consecutive re-election. So how did he, legally get around that?
Well, legally is the key word there. It was a very deliberate move that started back in 2021.
After his party won the legislature.
Exactly. His Nuevas Ideas party got a supermajority, and one of the first things they did was just dismiss the Attorney General and, more importantly, the justices of the Supreme Court's constitutional chamber.
So they just replaced the referees.
They replaced the referees. The new court then, unsurprisingly, issued a ruling that, well, it reinterpreted the Constitution to allow his re-election bid.
Oh, wow.
And the result now is total dominance. Nuevas Ideas has 54 out of 60 seats. They can pass anything they want. There are basically no checks and balances left.
And the justification for all of this power always comes back to one thing: security.
Always.
Let's talk about the state of exception. It came right after this horrific day in March 2022. I think it was 62 murders in a single day.
A national shock.
The results, though, have been stunning. El Salvador went from having one of the highest homicide rates in the world to one of the lowest.
The numbers are historic. They truly are. The projection for 2024 is something like 1.8 homicides per 100,000 people.
Unthinkable 5 years ago. And it's led to this whole soft power rebrand, right? Surf City.
Yeah, hosting international surf competitions. The U.S. even lowered its travel advisory to level 1. It's a complete identity shift.
So what was the trade-off? What was the cost for this newfound peace?
The cost was civil liberties, plain and simple. Under this decree, over 83,000 people have been arrested.
83,000.
And some core rights are just suspended. The right to a lawyer, for example. And they extended how long you can be held without charge from 72 hours to 15 days.
That's a huge change.
It is. But you have to understand, for the average Salvadoran who lived in daily terror of gangs, they felt an immediate sense of freedom, the kind of freedom that lets you walk down your own street. That's a very powerful trade.
Okay, let's pivot to that last pillar, the big economic experiment, Bitcoin.
Right. September 2021, they became the first country in the world to make it legal tender.
A huge ideological statement.
A huge statement, but an experiment that has seen a major policy retreat.
How so?
By early 2025, they had to amend the law. The part that made it mandatory for all businesses to accept Bitcoin, that's gone. Now it's voluntary.
But I thought adoption was really low anyway. Less than 10% of people were actually using it. So why bother changing the law?
Because of the IMF. It was a direct demand from the International Monetary Fund to unlock a desperately needed loan of $1.4 billion.
Oh, it was about cash flow.
Absolutely. The economic backbone of El Salvador is remittances money sent home from abroad. It's over 20% of their GDP. And that money just stayed in dollars. The crypto dream never materialized, and reality, in the form of the IMF, came knocking.
So when you put it all together, what we're seeing is a country that has essentially traded the chaotic mess of a democracy for the quiet order of an authoritarian state.
That's the core contradiction. They've successfully rebranded from murder capital to surf paradise.
But here's the final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Can a government that built its entire identity and success on destroying its enemies, first the gangs, then the political opposition, can it ever really transition?
Right. Can it become a government focused on long-term sustainable development if it's also destroyed all the tools for accountability, like an independent judiciary, along the way?